Good morning. Enjoy yourselves today.
The country's completely overrun.
They're forcing Jews out of their homes. They're taking us all to the ghetto.
Thousands of people are dying. The littlest of children.
We have room. We could hide them. Bring as many as you can. What a terrible time you must have had. German troops come every morning. You can't make a sound.
Mama?
Have you been keeping secrets from me?
No one knows how hard it is. You can never tell who your enemies are or who to trust. Maybe that's why I love animals so much. You look in their eyes, and you know exactly what's in their hearts.
What have you been up to in your little zoo?
Good afternoon or evening, wherever you are, whatever time it is for you, YouTubers out there. Welcome to my Matinee Madness channel. I'm your host, David G. And today we will be reviewing a movie that is, I believe, still in theaters nationwide, entitled The Zookeeper's Wife. And this is the story of Antonia Zubrinski and her husband, who owned a small zoo in Warsaw, Poland in 1939. At the time of World War II, when the Nazis basically came in and occupied Warsaw, and basically, of course, to rule the world and to exterminate the Jews in that area in 1939. And as I said, that the Zubinskis owned a zoo that is nearly destroyed when the Nazis attack and ultimately occupy their city. And as the story ensues, Antonia and her husband come up with the idea to use the underground area of their zoo. So you could call it, it's like a big bunker down there. They have places where they did keep animals, and they decide to form a sort of makeshift underground railroad for the beleaguered Jews to help keep them safe, and eventually to smuggle them out of the country to safety so they can avoid being captured and, of course, ultimately taken to a concentration camp. Her and her husband, they print new passports for them. You know, they dye their hair and help them alter their appearance to hide them from the Nazis until they can make a safe escape out of Warsaw. And the number one thing that I will say about this movie is that this whole film is an exercise in the old cliche or the old adage, less is more. This is a very dramatic, powerful, and emotionally moving film, but it is also a very measured film. All the performances are very measured. The The direction is also very measured. I mean, this is a very brutal story about a terrible time in history and a time of war, but it is not a graphic film. There's not really a lot of graphic violence. You know, there's some terrible indignities and dehumanizing things that are visited, of course, upon the Jews by the Nazis. But again, that is not shown in a graphic or gratuitous way. You see just enough in this film to give you the flavor of what's going on, and so you can have empathy for the characters, but you never get the feel, like as I do with some Hollywood movies, that they're using, you know, the brutality, the violence, and such to titillate you or to entertain you. No, you are drawn in by the compelling story, and what entertains you is the emotional empathy that you have with the situation and the characters, and the suspense and the danger of the situation. And as I said, another example of the measuredness of this film are the performances of all the actors. And of course, outstanding above them all is the star of the film, Jessica Chastain, who you may know from The Help, Zero Dark 30, and several other films. A very versatile actress. But in this film, she really shows her mettle in how to portray several emotions, sometimes all at once, hitting every emotional beat, but never taking it over the top. And this is a very dramatic situation for her character. You know, she is a wife and a mother of a young child, and now her zoo has nearly been destroyed when the Nazis have come in, dropping bombs that nearly kill her child. So she's got that emotion going on. Then she's married, as I said before, but the Nazis come by her place often for supplies and such. And one of the Nazis is a former zoo curator himself. And you can see early on when he meets Antonia that he has quite the hots and designs on her. And when they come up with the idea, you know, to basically house the Jews, Antonia uses her friendship with him to wrap him around her finger. So here she is, she's disgusted by, you know, what the Nazis have done to her home and what they're doing to the Jews, but she has to, on some level, return the advances, the romantic advances that he's subtly making toward her every day, sending her signals, and she has to pretend that, you know, she's picking up what he's putting down. So that is another place, an area where Jessica Chastain, where she has to turn on so many emotions from one scene to the next, and she does it with such a wonderful sense of ease. You know, it's just like kind of watching an emotional dance of the seven veils, where she's taking off one veil and another, and then putting one on and taking another one off, and she does it so masterfully. And with all that's going on in this film, you know, with the war, you know, the abuse of the Jews, and, you know, the little mock love triangle that she has because she has to pretend that she's accepting the Nazis' advances, but of course that doesn't make her husband feel so great, and he's wondering, you know, maybe she's into this a little bit too much. So there's so much going on, but the measured performance of Jessica Chastain really sustains, you know, this entire film. The whole film is basically told pretty much through the eyes of Antonia, and Jessica really draws us into that character. She draws us into her conflicts and everything that's going on with this character, so you have an amazing amount of emotional empathy with this character. You're right there in all of her trials and perils. And this film, as far as the direction and everything, as I said, it's also measured. You see there's so much, you know, trauma there's so much abuse going on between the Nazis and the Jews, but you see just enough, again, to give you the idea, to draw you into it, so you will have empathy for the situation. And one particularly poignant scene is when the little Jewish children are being loaded onto this Nazi train, and of course they are being loaded onto the train to be taken, to a concentration camp where they will be ultimately killed. And they're all separated from their parents, and they have a caretaker there that's telling the children all these wonderful stories about where they're going. They're going to a magical land. They're going to see all kinds of exciting, wonderful things, and they're excited to get on the train. But he knows, and everyone else knows, Antonia's husband knows, that these kids are taken to a camp where they're going to be abused, they're going to be experimented on, and ultimately they are going to be killed. But again, it's heartbreaking and heart-wrenching, because as the audience, we know what's going on, but it's told in such a subtle, powerful way that it will just tug at your heartstrings without being corny, melodramatic, or over the top. And there's another thing that happens to I won't necessarily call her a minor character, because the abuse that this character suffers is one of the most poignant parts of the film, and she ends up being rescued by Antonia's husband, and they have to be basically smuggled out of the ghetto area where all the Jews have been forced to live before they are dragged off to the concentration camp. And she ends up in the zoo, on the basement underneath the zoo, the underground area. And, she's so traumatized by what has happened to her that she can't even speak. And then Jessica gives her, a pet, I believe a pet rabbit, and that eventually brings her out of her morose, emotional state, and she begins to vocalize what happened to her, but not in explicit terms, but just enough to where what happened to her, and they show just enough to let you know what's going on. And that all through the film, the emotions are just steadily churning and building up for the audience. And for me, but when she finally broke down and was able to begin to vocalize her abuse, that's when I started really to cry. I mean, that's when the tears were flowing for me. And that's what this film does. It subtly weaves its way around your heart, and then it really tugs on the strings when you get to the climax. And the script is just the story is just so wonderfully threaded in that way, and the director, the way everything's shot, the pacing is wonderful. It's a slow build, but definitely there's enough steady plot and action to keep you engaged to where you don't get bored. And there's so many nuances about this film that it breathes, it has an emotion, it has life to it. And that's one area where it stands out, where it stands far above a movie like, let's say, 12 Years a Slave, because 12 Years a Slave, the directing pace seemed to be just so slow. And once he got kidnapped, there was no movement in story. Just like it seems like he was there for the majority of the 2 hours of the film. Then he finally gets released, but in that 2 hours, it's just 2 hours of straight abuse, and it doesn't feel like much story, And a lot of times that films with heavy topics like this, they have this kind of black, morose cloud over them that seems to weigh the whole movie down to where it's not entertaining, to where the story doesn't seem to move, and it just seems to lay there. This movie had a lot of life. It had a lot of suspense. It had the mock love triangle going on. There was just so much going on, so many emotional layers, and so many undertone beats for you to undertone stories for you to get involved with, that it was very entertaining, and you always wonder, what was going to happen. And like I said, they were making new passports for the Jews, and there was always so many threats that they would be discovered. She had a little child that had to keep all this secret, and everyone was afraid that he was going to end up letting something slip to the Nazi commandant played by Charles Bruhl. So there was suspense. There was a spy kind of element to it. There was all the emotional beats, and of course, then it's a war movie with decent battle sequences. So there just was a lot and enough going on and enough pacing to where it was exciting, despite, you know, the depressing aspect of all the abuse visited upon, you know, the Jewish people. So, and everything was measured to where I think it was just all masterfully and practically perfectly done. And this movie definitely could have fallen into an overly sense of moroseness and depression, or it could have fallen into melodrama where everything was way over the top, and it avoided all of those pitfalls, and it really engrossed you and drug you into the story to where you were into it from the beginning to the end, and the ending was a very satisfying but very realistic conclusion on top of that. So really, I have nothing negative to say about this film. I highly recommend it. Wonderful measured performances by Jessica Chastain and Charles Brewer and the entire cast. Wonderful direction, cinematography, wonderful script, wonderful, outstanding pacing. And though this movie probably won't get the box office or the buzz of, you know, Schindler's List, because of course I believe, you know, that is a Spielberg film, but this movie, as far as Holocaust movies go, I believe it is worthy of the same praise of that movie. I would put it in that same category. I would call it a poor man's Schindler's List. Not that it came off poor at all. I mean, the production values were excellent, wasn't cheap and everything, but of course it didn't have the promotion of, you know, Spielberg behind it. So I'm sure it won't be that, you know, successful in the box office, but I do believe it will be a success, and it really deserves to be a success. So thank you so much for watching this review, and I highly recommend this. If the Zookeeper's Wife is still available in your area, please go see it. It's a moving, powerful film, a great cinema experience, but just bring tissues because it is a very heart-wrenching subject matter. Thank you so much for watching this review. And again, if you have not subscribed to my Matinee Madness YouTube channel, please hit the little subscribe button and hit the bell, and you will be subscribed, and you'll be alerted by email every time I upload a new video. Thank you so much for watching, and have a great day.